to Elevate Louisiana Engage podcast. Elevate Louisiana was founded earlier this year to empower women leaders throughout Louisiana by connecting and educating them on the challenges impacting our state with data-driven, nonpartisan solutions to make a better future for Louisiana. I'm your host, Julie Stokes, and today we'll be continuing our series of interviews. We are wrapping up the 2020 legislative sessions to date, as might be another one in the fall. But today we will continue our discussion from business's point of view. Our guests are Marie Centanni, Director of Public Affairs and Free Enterprise Institute at the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, or LABI, and Ileana Ledet, Vice President of Policy with Greater New Orleans Inc. Welcome, Marie and Ileana.
Thank you, Julie.
Hey, well, since you guys aren't two of the faces that we always see associated with your organizations, I'd just love to hear a little bit about you guys today. First of all, Marie, where'd you come from? And tell us about the things that you're interested in and about your life in policy.
Sure. Thank you, Julie. And I appreciate everything that you're doing with this effort. I think it's great to kind of get this collective group of women who are interested in policy and in what's going on in the state and in their communities. So as you said, I'm LABI's Director of Public Affairs and the Free Enterprise Institute. The Free Enterprise Institute is LABI's 501c4 organization. It's sort of a side organization with the mission of educating the public and finding opportunities for engagement and advocacy on free enterprise. And the most notable thing that we've done is host a series of candidate boot camps where we kind of walk people through the mechanics of running for office, best practices, the rules, the regulations, get them comfortable with how it's done in the hopes that we'll get more smart, good people running for office. And in fact, we have one coming up this week I'm pretty excited about. But we were heavily engaged on tort reform as one of the biggest issues affecting business right now and the business climate in Louisiana. And as I'm sure we'll get to in a few minutes, we were very successful this session in advocating for that. And so for LABI, I really kind of focus on engaging with the members and with the public outside of the traditional realm of the direct engagement we have with legislators, the direct engagement with the media. I sort of look to our general membership and make sure that we're communicating with them. But I do have a background working in state government and in journalism and economic development in South Louisiana.
Awesome. Well, it's really great to have you here. Ileana?
Hey, so I work in policy at Greater New Orleans Inc. We're the regional economic development organization for Southeast Louisiana, for 10 parishes in Southeast Louisiana. And so you have similar economic development organizations across the state, and we work as partners with those as well. But we are charged with bringing businesses here, making sure that businesses that are here stay here. And that has to do, my role is the business environment. And that's where our policy work lies at the local level, if it has a regional impact, at the state level, and also at the federal level. So when you're looking at policies that impact the business environment, it is everything from, it could be tax reform, it could be legal reform, it could be our roads, infrastructure, our auto insurance rates, education, early childhood, all the way up to higher ed. Coastal protection. It's just very broad, all of the factors that impact the quality of life for residents and the business environment. So those are the areas we work in. Prior to coming to GNO Inc., I also, like Marie, worked for state government. I worked at the Department of Insurance and at the Department of Education for a few years. But originally I'm from Metairie, so was looking to get back here, and so came on board of GNO Inc. doing some policy work, and have been fortunate to have worked with Representative Stokes, which was a representative. We're very disheartened when you left Baton Rouge, but excited to work with you in this new leadership role statewide. Really excited about it. So thanks for having us today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. And I'm excited to learn more about, I was thinking about you, particularly Ileana, and I'm like, I don't know where she came from.
Oh, so Metairie, yes. Well, my family's from Honduras. Awesome. My family's from Honduras, but born here and grew up in Metairie. So there you
go. Well, thank you. Good to get to know you a little bit better. So we will go ahead and go straight to our work, and that is the Louisiana legislative sessions so far of 2020. First of all, I'd just like to ask, what was it like up there in Baton Rouge this year with the coronavirus pandemic causing so many problems for this brand new legislature?
It was,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it was an odd situation, especially with such a huge freshman class coming in into their first session. They were in for just a few days before they got shut down, brought back in under much different circumstances. And for someone who is an advocate, the access to the legislature was different. I wouldn't say it was limited because it was certainly there, but it was different. Masks, the common spaces were not necessarily allowed. You had to space out in committee rooms. You weren't allowed in the House chamber. You were upstairs in the balcony, but there was still, it's 2020, plenty of ways to communicate with legislators. I'll let Ileana.
Yeah, exactly. Now, high reliance on technology, a lot of emails. I did not go up during the regular session. I went up a couple of times during the special session. But during the regular session, just communicating with legislators via calls, old school phone calls, texts, emails, and all the legislators that we reached out to were always really responsive. In a lot of ways, some of our time was more productive, being able, as legislator, you're running from committee room to committee room, trying to follow different bills, and being able to watch them online. I heard from a lot of stakeholders that is actually more efficient in some ways to be able to monitor it online and being able to go to multiple hearings, but physically being there, it just was a very, very different environment.
Yeah, well, and I had helped with one bill for cancer advocacy, and I was so glad that I had a Mac and that I could text a mile a minute with my fingers because I couldn't have kept up with just thumbs. So many people at one time. So, can you address some of the coronavirus-related bills that passed during the sessions and the impact that they've had on business or that they will have on business?
Off the top, a bill that LABI, I know, worked, a package of bills that LABI worked very strongly on advocating for folks were the liability bills. And Marie, I don't know if you want to expand on those, but those were a top item for all of us. And so the idea being that not just businesses, individuals, schools, all of these daycare centers could open without threat of a civil lawsuit. And these bills didn't provide blanket immunity. The organization or the individual had to abide by all of the local, state, whatever the applicable safety guidelines are. And, be showing that they were doing everything possible to protect their customers, clients, employees, but providing some level of protection. And it's a conversation. I'm glad Louisiana was really proactive in getting those packages passed. And thanks to LABI for all of their efforts and making sure the right language is in there. Really broad bipartisan support. There were some good conversations and discussions, and I think the right questions were being asked. But when you look at where the votes came out on those bills, a lot of broad support, and this is something that we're seeing the federal government look at now. Garrett Graves has introduced a bill that is similar in that, as long as you're doing the right things and there isn't evidence of gross negligence, that you'll be protected. Before I get to other ones, Marie, do you want to, I'm sorry if I jumped on your toes on that one. Really, I felt like that's off the top. Really
not at all. And Ileana, you were part of that that task force that the Senate President and the House Speaker put together that really looked at what do we need to do in the immediate and the long term for our economy to recover. And so speaking for LABI, we have more than 2,000 businesses, large and small, every sector you can imagine. More than 80% of our membership is small business. And I think they collectively employ more than 300,000 Louisiana employees. So when we get into issues like this, it truly is a workforce issue. And when we heard from our members, when the shutdown started, we started a series of Zoom meetings by sectors, really trying to take the temperature of the situation. What do you need right now? What do you need going forward? And really the thing that came out repeatedly, and even the Resilient Louisiana Task Force is finding this in some of their hearings, is the business owners afraid to act because of the fear of these frivolous lawsuits. And so we knew that in order to give business owners and consumers the confidence to move forward, We look at masks, we look at a lot of the guidelines that are happening right now, and there's so many boxes to check before you move. We wanted to at least lift that threat of frivolous lawsuits so that they could move forward and open their business. And as Ileana said, as long as you're abiding by CDC guidelines or whatever local parameters have been put in place, and there's no gross negligence, then you should be free of someone saying, I was in your restaurant, I tested positive, therefore it's your fault, I'm going to sue you, and you're liable for it. And so there was House Bill 826 by Thomas Presley that specifically applied to businesses. Senator Sharon Hewitt, Senate Bill, I think it was 491, dealt with people who manufactured things like the homemade PPE, the makeshift hand sanitizer. We saw a lot of distilleries sort of convert their businesses to make hand sanitizer. Well, they needed to be free from liability as well. Now, obviously, there were some workers' comp issues and some things that made common sense to keep in play, but just the threat of someone looking for an opportunity to sue, we could see it, and business owners felt it, and that speaks to Louisiana's greater legal climate. But that was something that had to happen as well. And then we saw in the special session House Bill 59 by Representative Mincy, who's a former school board member, specifically written for the school districts to have a little bit of protection as they're now looking to open up as well. And so the governor did sign all of those into law. So hopefully that put the confidence in place for a little bit of the economy to get going.
And that doesn't protect in the like if there's gross negligence. And I think
Right.
that's something important for the public, especially us as parents getting ready to send our kids to schools. If the school is letting people go without a mask, and even if you have like a particular teacher saying nobody's wearing a mask in here, then it's not going to cover. You're not going to have immunity from having that problem. It's in the case where everybody's doing the right thing.
Right. Trying to do the right thing and be responsible and follow the guidelines you've been given, which do change from community to community and from week to week, depending on how this virus is taking shape. But as long as you're following what's in order and the information that you have, you shouldn't be penalized. We believe.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you had the other, bills. There were several measures, but the other bills providing direct assistance. So what happened at the federal level is we saw, several loan programs. And so what state legislators looked at doing was getting cash in the hands of individuals and businesses. So a couple of bills, there was Representative Jenkins' bill that provides that $250 hazard pay for frontline workers, those people that had to work, grocery store clerks, bus drivers, healthcare workers. That program opens up tomorrow, I think, administered through the Department of Revenue. And then the Main Street Recovery Program that's being run through the Treasurer's Office, that's for smaller businesses that did not receive grants initially, did not receive grants from the federal government. So, looking at ways beyond loans to get some money in the hands of these strapped businesses, because a lot of them aren't looking for loans because they're wondering, how am I going to pay that back? So the legislators were really thoughtful in trying to devise ways to get some, cash in small business owners' hands.
Yeah. Do we have any idea of when those $15,000 potential grants are going to be expected to start coming out?
So the treasurer, I think he was speaking this morning at the legislature, working through the details with a lot of partners. Applications are going to start being accepted by July 28th, and it's louisianamainstreet.com is the website. And they have FAQs on there. They have questions. How do you determine if you're eligible? It's for businesses that are smaller than 50 employees. How to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. For the first 3 weeks, they didn't receive a PPP loan or an EIDL advance, that economic injury disaster loan payment, or they weren't compensated through a business interruption policy. So the idea is that opens up by July 28th. There's about $275 million in that program. And so that money could run out very quickly, and it's a reimbursable program. So a small business goes and says, look, I spent money on payroll, I spent this on my rent, I spent this, and they have to provide documentation, and then the state will come and reimburse that small business with that documentation. But plenty of good information on that louisianamainstreet.com website. And back to your question, Julie, the treasurer had said initially that he expected the payments to go out pretty quickly, like within 10 days to 14 days once you applied. And then that money needs to be expended by December.
Great, great. And what about the 250s? When do they expect that to hit mailboxes or accounts?
Tomorrow it opens up for applications. So I don't know what the time frame is for getting that payment into their hands. I think the Department of Revenue has to verify that they had income of less than $50,000 and that they fall into one of those criteria, that those specific jobs. I don't know what the timeline is to actually get that cash in the hands of those individuals, but I would assume it's pretty quickly.
Yeah, we might want to put up some social media for that, for Elevate, to let people know that it's time to start doing that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, okay, so then on to, you know, there were some tax credit extensions and expansions that were passed during the regular session. Could you speak to any of those measures that you feel will be particularly impactful to the business community this year?
Yeah, so there were several that were introduced in the regular, but the ones that I want to address were the ones that are being signed. And breaking news, I just saw that the governor had signed a few of them about 90 minutes ago. And so the first two, one of them is the historic tax credit program that many folks are familiar with. It's a very popular program, and it provides a 25% tax credit for rehabilitations to historic tax structures. Has been very popular in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, also in Monroe, rural and urban areas, small cities and large. It's really, study after study has shown that there has been a return on investment for this historic tax credit. One of the, perhaps the main point was it's been so popular that its costs has been going up year after year. So this year, legislators decided to put a cap on the program of $125 million. And I think for the last 3 years, I think between 90 and 130, 120, 130 was being used. So a cap of about 125 feels about right. And so I think it's something that we can all live with and are glad that the governor has signed this into law. And perhaps really importantly is just extending the program. So when you have a developer looking at a project, this historic tax credit program was due to expire, I think, at the beginning, January 1st, 2022. And so what this bill did by Tanner McGee is it extends it to 2026. So now developers know that that program is going to be there for a few more years. So it provides some certainty and stimulate investment. You know, in this current environment, if you can help out investors, this stimulates communities. We see it all over town here. Decrepit buildings brought back into commerce. So we're really glad to see that one signed by the governor. Another one that I wanted to highlight, because I don't know how well known it is an angel investor tax credit program. And so the angel investor tax credit, it provides if you invest in a startup business. It has to be a startup entrepreneurial business, once again, less than 50 employees, less than $2 million in revenue. I think it's just a certain criteria that has been set by Louisiana Economic Development. And so what the angel investor tax credit does, it's been in existence, but a bill by Jimmy Harris this year, it extends it and it adds an enhancement for opportunity zones. But what's interesting is it's for investments in businesses and opportunity zones. So a lot of the criticism or questions about the Opportunity Zone program is that it is just incentivizing investments in properties, perhaps hotels or all these different buildings. What Jimmy Harris's bill does, and I think it was SB 24 in the special session, it incentivizes investments in those startups located in opportunity zones. So regular angel investor credit is 25%. Now, if you invest in a startup business meeting the state criteria, there's an enhanced, in an opportunity zone, there's an enhanced benefit of 35%. It's an extra bump of another 10%. And so we'd like to see more diversification, more investments in these startups. You know, Waiter in Lafayette was one of the benefits of this angel investor tax credit years ago. It helped them get off the ground.
How much did we fix Waiter during this shutdown?
Yeah, right. Yes. just, diversifying. So we were big fans at GNO Inc. of those particular tax credit programs. And then there were other ones that were introduced and just signed by the governor as well. A couple of other ones, including an expansion of the Quality Jobs program. That is a very popular incentive program. And so if a company pays a certain amount, I think it's about $45,000 a year, and they create 5 new jobs, each paying at least $45,000 a year, you can get a 4% rebate on your payroll as a business. What this bill does that the governor just passed, it expands the types of industries eligible for that Quality Jobs rebate. So now you're adding in hotels, restaurants, and retail with less than 50 employees that create 5 new jobs, paying that quality job threshold. It started out as a broader measure in the regular session and passed, but it was vetoed by the governor, came back and was narrowed in the special. And so now he has signed this pared down version of the expansion quality job. Another
I've
tax.
got it.
Yeah.
So that's why I was thinking, well, wait, I thought that got vetoed, but it was at 6% when it got vetoed.
Well, the 6% is if you pay, I think, $60,000. So it's a 4% rebate for the business for jobs that pay $45,000. A 6% rebate if you pay $60,000. Julie, I think you're correct in that it started out as a more generous rebate in the regular session, and this, yes, scaled it back.
Yeah, because I'd be curious, and I mean, have to, but what was the difference between the one that was vetoed and the one that ultimately was able to be signed?
Yeah, the first one was just broader. I don't think it was for, and this one is also short term. I think it's only for maybe 2 years, just to jumpstart the rehiring of folks. It's a short term. It's not a indefinite expansion of quality jobs.
Yeah, right.
The office was paying close attention to the fiscal notes on all these bills, and Julie and I talked about this a little bit on a separate Zoom call, but what you saw, you see it all the time at the Capitol, especially in Ways and Means and Rev and Fisk, this philosophical divide between investing in the community and where the ROI goes, that return on investment, and state fisc. And especially this session, you saw local government sort of pitted against business repeatedly, looking at some of these incentives, saying, all right, but right now our budgets are hurting because our revenue is down, because economic activity has come to a screeching halt. What do we do about our city parish budget? We can't afford to give incentives away and not have that income. But at the same time, you had business saying, well, do you want us to pay these taxes this year? Or do you want us to be around next year to continue paying those taxes? And so it was really, when you talk about the ROI of some of these incentives, it's, well, return to whom? Is the return on investment increased economic activity and economic opportunity in the form of jobs and things that are available in your community, versus a strict budget line item looking at tax revenue for even a state or local government? So that was just an interesting struggle to see play out in a very acute way when budgets are really hurting this year. And so we were surprised and really excited at the amount of measures like this that passed, that the governor ultimately signed.
Yeah. Well, and I think about when the money had originally been appropriated from the money that was drawn down from the federal government to relieve COVID problems. Yeah, the CARES Act. Some of that money was allocated to local governments, and the money, that $275 million of the local government money, came out and went in this program to businesses. But there's some subtext that I don't think a lot of people understand about local government's ability to use that money. Wasn't there an issue there?
Yeah. So it was, for local governments, it works through reimbursement. So local government needs to spend the money on expenses related to responding to COVID-19. And so many of those expenses are absorbed by the state. And so you had the Division of Administration saying, we're not quite sure that the locals are going to be able to pull down all of that money when it comes to the end, that there will likely be some funds left over, because a lot of those expenses are not reimbursable, or they're already being paid for by the state. So there is going to be that money for other programs.
And that really made it all kind of come together for me, and it made a lot more sense, at that point when you understood that there's a big picture here, and that this allowed us to use all of the funds with that kind of big picture in mind, that the local governments might not have been able to use it entirely.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the other big issues of this session was tort reform. I mean, quite frankly, it was front and center during the regular and the special sessions. I'm going to ask a couple of different angles of it, but could you talk a bit about the proposals that were introduced, explain how they could help lower auto insurance, and then how, well, I'll save the other part because it's how a new class of legislators really made a difference in the conversations.
Certainly.
But well, I want to save time for that. So, but if we could talk a little bit about the proposals and how they might help lower insurance rates for now.
Sure. So Louisiana, as you know, is number 2 in the nation in terms of the cost of our auto insurance. It's abnormally high when you look at our accident rate. And what we found in Louisiana is that we might have a slightly high accident rate, and you can blame roads, you can blame bad drivers, you can blame texting and driving, whatever you want. But in the end, we're still twice as likely to sue for bodily injury. And that climate that encouraged lawsuits exists because the way cases play out in Louisiana almost guarantees a payout. And so, you've heard the term, I'm sure, jackpot justice. It's like, just see what you can get, roll the dice, right? And it's why you see so many personal injury attorneys focus on auto accidents. It's because it is such a market, and it shouldn't be that way, because in the end, there's a very real person paying that cost. And when we look at the business community, it does trickle back to businesses. And so this has been a few years in making. This is the third or fourth session where we've had legislation pushed through. This freshman class, a lot of them ran on this issue. And so for them, it was a campaign promise because they heard the outcry over auto insurance rates. They heard people understand caused by our flawed legal system, and they wanted it fixed. And so you saw a huge push, a lot of will to get it done. And that tenacity was really impressive to see, and how they overcame a couple of hurdles, got really creative, really looked at the procedure and some tools that they had available. And so that was encouraging to see. But specifically, the legislation that ended up passing, and the governor has said he would sign it, is House Bill 57 by Speaker Clay Schexnayder. And that bill does a few things. It didn't go quite as far as the Talbot bill in the regular session, and not as far as the omnibus bills of last year, but it does represent a compromise. And we believe that it will have a profound effect on our legal climate and therefore our auto insurance rates. So it does primarily 4 things. It lowers the jury trial threshold from $50,000 down to $10,000. And there are some stipulations for city courts and some other things, but in general, right now in Louisiana, your case has to be valued at $50,000 for you to get a jury. Otherwise, it goes straight to a judge. And there's evidence in some areas of the state of venue shopping, of saying, all right, we're gonna magically get sued for $49,999. So we're going to avoid a jury, and we're going to wait on a certain day to file it so that we know we end up on this judge's docket because he or she is friendly to the cause. And those are other ways that almost guarantee that payout at the end of when a case plays out. So now $10,000 is the trigger, especially for those auto injury cases. It addresses direct action. Right now in Louisiana, you can sue the insurance company directly. So if I get in an accident with Julie Stokes, not only suing Julie Stokes, I'm naming the insurance company, which is more likely to influence awards just when that insurance company is named, because you think of the company, not the person, and you assume they can afford it, and the charges, we believe, get ramped up as well. The seatbelt gag rule is repealed. In Louisiana, you're not allowed to present evidence of whether someone was wearing a seatbelt in an accident. And as we all know, you wear a seatbelt, it prevents major injury, catastrophic injury, and even death. And so if that's part of the law, we're not saying you don't wear a seatbelt, you don't get an award at the end of the day, but that evidence should be up for consideration. And along those lines, and it's very complicated, but what's called collateral source, and that is you get in an accident, you have a hospital bill or some sort of medical bill. Well, when you get your bill, there's that initial sticker shock. and they'll say, you got an x-ray, it's $5,000. And then later your insurance company goes back and forth with them and they settle, and your insurance company will say, well, we settled that for $1,500 and you don't owe anything. Well, that evidence was not allowed to be presented. And so when you value the case, only that initial sticker shock was allowed in, not that accounting of what was actually paid. And so if you think about it, no one is owed that money. That difference between what was paid and what was initially charged is not owed to anybody. So why should it be part of putting a value on these cases? So those four things were tweaked. And we believe, when you talk to the insurance companies, you ask them why their rates are so high in Louisiana compared to the rest of the nation, they'll cite these things. And it's a cause and effect scenario. When we go to court, we're guaranteed to lose, and it's guaranteed to be so much more expensive than in other states. If we change that factor, that cause, logically, the effect should be rates will come down. We'll bring more companies into Louisiana to write more policies, increase competition, and we will see rates go down.
Was there anything in the bill to force the carriers to decrease rates? Because I know that was always one of the kind of things that was said.
There were other versions of the bill that had those guarantees in there. But in the end, through the negotiations, this bill does not have that spelled out guarantee. But the market conditions that cause prices to be high are what's going to be affected by this bill. It is true legal reform.
Well, I'm really hopeful, because being second in the country and something bad, you know how that is. We don't want that.
We don't like being on those lists.
No. So Ileana, looked like you had something that you wanted to say there, and I might have cut you off.
No, not at all. We could talk about this all afternoon, but what Marie was saying, it's about bringing competition here. When businesses move here, you guys know, when you have friends who move here, one of the first things they say is the sticker shock with auto insurance rates. And, I used to work at the insurance department, and I'm not speaking for them, but just based on my experience here and experience there, after Katrina, you would expect that homeowners insurance rates would be outrageous here. And what the state did was it put in place all of these building codes, and you need to build higher and stronger. And we did all of these things that would attract more homeowners insurance companies to Louisiana. So now our homeowners market is very strong. You have a lot of companies that are writing, and it makes our homeowners insurance rates more affordable. Problem with auto insurance is we don't have enough companies writing. So the intention with bills like this is to improve our attractiveness to insurers, so more of them come here, we have some more choices, and it brings rates down. I mean, that's what we want to see. And Andrew, how does this bring insurance rates down? By bringing more folks here and having more consumer choice. So, we're looking forward to seeing those rates come down as a result.
So were there any other bills that maybe didn't make it through the legislative process that you're expecting to see either in the fall or next year? What do you think's coming up?
What I would like to see, and it might be something that Julie, you would have some thoughts on, is more movement on centralized sales tax. Another area that we hear from businesses about our complicated tax structure. There was a bill that was scaled back some. It's a study resolution to look at how to move Louisiana more towards centralized sales tax. And that's something we'd like to see advance. There was another study on workforce and identifying more opportunities for training through the community and technical college system, funding opportunities, unemployment figures and the market is not going to look great for a while. So how do we maximize funding and use our current system and expand on training opportunities? That's a conversation that we will, LABI and GNO Inc, and all of us will be involved in going forward. So those are two areas that we'd like to see some movement on.
Yeah, and to reiterate what you're saying, next session, the 2021 session, would be a fiscal session, and it's the one opportunity during a term where you have a fiscal session early in a term. You have a fiscal session in the second year of a term, which is next year, and then in the fourth year of a term. And it's really hard to do any kind of big tax reform or reforming anything in the last term because everybody's looking at reelection. So I think next year is our shot, to get some positive changes made to make Louisiana more competitive. So I hope we can do that as well.
Yeah.
So it's about all the time we have for today, but first I would like to say how good it is to have these two strong women, just strong women. When I look at their impact on the state, their impact on their regions, I can't say enough about them. Loved working with them. Dynamic, amazing women. And that's part of who we are at Elevate, is lifting up leaders like that. And these two are just two fabulous examples of just that. I'd like to thank them, Marie Centanni with LABI and Ileana Ledet with GNO Inc. for being our guests today. And just ask that after you watch this video, don't forget to like and follow Elevate Louisiana on all of your social media platforms. I'm your host, Julie Stokes, and see you next time.